Story recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a horror, sci-fi, and thriller film called Splinter. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. One fine day, a lovely couple, Polly and Seth, go out to the woods for a romantic camping trip to celebrate their anniversary. However, the two couldn't have more mixed opinions about the activity, with Polly being excited for outdoor experience while Seth would rather stay indoors. After trying and failing to set up their tent, they just end up breaking it. With no spare tent, Seth manages to convince Polly to find a nearby motel they can stay in. While driving, they come across Lacey at the side of the road, gesturing for them to stop. Although a bit reluctant, they slowly pull over, thinking she might need some help. While they argue about what to do, Dennis comes up to the driver's window, spooking them both. Dennis asks them to open the window, but when they don't comply, he pulls out a gun, forcing them to do everything he says. Dennis holds them hostage, but Lacey isn't too enthusiastic about the idea. As it turns out, the two are on their way to Mexico to start over, but their car broke down. Dennis is an escaped convict, and Lacey is a drug addict. They all get inside the car, and Dennis makes Polly drive. While on the road, Dennis demands to take their wallets and belongings, and as he scans their IDs, he notices that Seth still has a student card. However, when he teases Seth for being too old to be in school, he explains that he's actually getting a doctorate degree. Lacey assumes that Seth is a doctor and asks if he can write her a drug prescription, but Seth clarifies that he's majoring in biology. After the small conversation, Polly accidentally runs over a small animal on the road, but it's enough to pop their tire. The incident then triggers Lacey's weak mental state, remembering her pet that died. While Polly and Dennis try to fix the tire, Lacey urges Seth towards the dead animal, demanding that he help it. While they stare at the dead carcass, it suddenly starts to move, its tail trying to go for Lacey. The two flinch back in surprise, and Lacey shoots the dead animal and runs back to the car. Meanwhile, Seth is still observing the creature. On the other hand, Dennis accidentally gets a splinter on his finger while fixing the tire, which he just ignores, thinking it's nothing. In fright, Lacey runs back inside the car and forces Polly to drive, but she refuses to leave Seth behind and waits until he gets back inside the vehicle. Lacey starts to be a bit more agitated than she previously was, becoming too unstable as she even points the gun at Dennis, who's simply asking her what happened. Lacey explains that the animal attacked her, still thinking it was her pet. Dennis then asks Seth whether he saw something, but he denies it, making Dennis think that Lacey might be under the influence of drugs. However, Lacey insists that she hasn't done drugs in the last 2 days, so it's impossible that she hallucinated. Their car starts to overheat a little while later, so Dennis tells Polly to pull over at the nearby gas station. After they step out of the car, Lacey immediately goes straight for the bathroom to take a hit, but it's currently occupied. Meanwhile, Dennis takes Polly inside the store to gather some supplies for the car, leaving Seth to pump gas. Inside, Dennis notices that the attendant is missing, so he takes some candy from the counter. As Lacey forces the bathroom door open, she suddenly sees the shopkeeper inside, spikes protruding from his bleeding body. Lacey then runs away, shouting for Dennis, but when she tries to explain that she saw a man with spikes on his body, Dennis just looks at her in disbelief. That is, until the man appears from behind Lacey and instantly kills her. Dennis tries to shoot the creature, but it's relentless. It starts to go after Seth beside the car, who's slow to react until Polly shouts for him to run. The three of them run back inside the store, and Polly locks the door. She also tries to call for help, but Dennis smashes the phone, not letting her call the police because he might go back to jail. While behind the counter, he sees the security footage from outside and notices that Lacey's arm is still moving, thinking that she's still somehow alive. He goes out to get her. Seth tries to cooperate with him, telling him that he'll notify Dennis if the creature starts moving, but they'll lock the door if it starts to go after him. However, Polly doesn't want to help the man who took them hostage, so when Dennis starts getting attacked by Lacey's body, she locks the door. On the other hand, Seth rushes over just in time to pull Dennis inside, cutting off Lacey's hand that manages to squeeze past the door. They see the spikes on the dismembered hand, and Seth comes to inspect it with a curious scientist's gaze. Seeing such a phenomenon for the first time, Dennis drops a heavy sack on it, but it's not enough to outright kill it. so Seth observes how the spikes try to feed on blood to regenerate. Then, while they stare at the hand, the spikes gain control of Lacey's body and tries to smash through the window, forcing the three to hide at the back of the store. Polly finds a back door, hoping they can escape quietly. Then, when Seth can't find a key, she makes him grab a screwdriver instead so that she can pop the door's hinges as per Dennis' suggestion. Although they manage to remove the door, another locked gate keeps them from escaping. Seconds later, they hear Lacey's body dashing through the roof, so Dennis hurriedly puts the door back in place. At the front door, a policewoman arrives and points a gun towards Dennis to prevent him from escaping, but Seth and Polly beg for her to go back to her car because it isn't safe. Unfortunately, the policewoman doesn't listen to them and thinks their main problem is being held hostage, not knowing about the more dangerous threat at bay. Dennis tries to play along with the policewoman, telling her that he's taking the two as hostages just so she'll call for help. She then calls for backup, but nobody answers. Soon enough, Lacey's body gets to her, the spikes falling on her face. Polly, Seth, and Dennis watch as the spikes get to the policewoman and rip her body in half, and the spikes attach to the policewoman's body into Lacey's to create a bigger creature. They all fall into a spiral, with Dennis throwing up and Polly crying out in fear. But they pull themselves together, trying to look for a way to save themselves. Polly's idea is to try and force their way back to the police car using a gun and a bat to fend off the enemy. But Seth and Dennis both know that it's a bad idea. So Dennis proposes pouring lighter fluid on the ground until it reaches the forest to set the trees on fire, noting that the forest is old and considered a national treasure, so help would arrive immediately. However, Seth points out that the fire might spread back to them, and since they're in a gas station, it would be a much more deadly risk. Nonetheless, Dennis and Polly start pouring the lighter fluid anyway. While trying to look for another alternative that won't put them in danger, Seth notices that the policewoman's walkie-talkie starts receiving a signal. Determined to grab it, Seth makes a makeshift hook device through reshaped clothing wires inside the store. Meanwhile, Dennis's splinter injury from the tire starts to get worse, but when Polly asks him if he's okay, he doesn't tell the truth about it. As Seth slowly manages to get the walkie-talkie, the creature drops from the roof, trying to force its hand inside a small window. Polly bashes it with a bat and cuts it off, but the hand starts to go after them inside the store. The couple hides behind shelves, and Dennis is suddenly out of sight. Seth tries to whistle to call Dennis's attention, but he gets no answer. A few seconds later, the hand finds them and starts running towards them, so they immediately back up, trying to throw whatever object they can grab to slow it down. Seth also uses a shelf rack to shield themselves out of its reach. Then, suddenly, Dennis appears behind them inside the beverage refrigerators and motions them in, warning them not to let the spikes get to them. Inside the walk-in fridge, they see Dennis's arm getting worse, his small splinter suddenly spreading through his arm. At the same time, Seth tries to understand how the spikes work and how they know how to chase their target. A few seconds later, spikes start to come out of Dennis's arm, taking control of him as it twists and turns. It then breaks his arm, and as Dennis prepares to cut it off using the knife that Polly's given him, he suddenly passes out. With no other choice, Seth continues the job for him, while Polly helps by subduing the spikes as Seth slices through his flesh. Dennis suddenly wakes up, screaming in pain, but when Seth gets to the bone, he can't cut through. Then, he sees a concrete block on the side, so he drops it on Dennis's arm to finish the job. While trying to recuperate, the three decide to have some drinks. Moments later, after talking for a while, Seth realizes something about how the spikes operate as a living organism. They go back to the security camera and rewatch the footage, seeing that the shopkeeper earlier didn't attack Seth but instead the overheating car. With that, Seth figures out that the spikes find a target through temperature, which is why the hand didn't follow them to the refrigerator since it couldn't detect targets in colder conditions. With this information, Seth devises a plan to lower his body temperature so he can go outside and get the police car. Of course, with his background, he knows how to reach the right temperature without endangering his life. Still, it's apparent how difficult it is as he is shivering while lying on bags of ice, trying to achieve it. As they help Seth back to the door, he keeps a thermometer in his mouth to keep watch of his temperature. Meanwhile, Polly throws fireworks through the back door to lure the creature away from Seth with the heat. Dennis opens the door for Seth and watches him struggle to try to get to the car, his limbs barely letting him walk as his body's freezing. When Polly comes back to check on Seth, Dennis switches places with her and continues throwing fireworks. However, he doesn't see the creature anywhere. Noticing that it's going after Seth, Dennis takes one of the fireworks and walks out the front door, baiting it. Unfortunately, the fireworks slowly fizzle out when he throws them. so the creature goes for him instead. Dennis then runs back to the store but can't lock the door in time, so the creature is able to force its way in. To save themselves, Dennis and Polly end up hiding inside the fridge once more. Inside the car, Seth fails to find the keys anywhere and makes the walkie-talkie work, so he takes a shotgun from the back and goes inside the store to help the two when he sees them getting chased. At the back, the remaining lit fireworks set fire to the lighter fluid they poured earlier, so the spiked hand goes towards it. But the bigger creature still won't give up on them, so Dennis asks for Seth's shotgun and tells him that he'll fend off the creature while they escape. He then starts shooting the creature as Seth and Polly run outside. Although he tries his best to keep it at bay, it eventually gets to him, the spikes piercing through his throat to infect him, so he lures it outside and shoots the gas tank, finally incinerating the creature. Polly and Seth see Dennis and run back to him, and as they see his state, they know that it's already too late to save him. Dennis then says one last farewell before letting them leave, shooting the remaining gas tank to blow up the entire gas station and killing himself. In the end, the couple goes back on the road and walks until they find help, not knowing that there are other infected corpses all over the woods.
This is all for Story Recap for today. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Tell us in the comments if you want us to recap your favorite movie. Watch other of our videos showing on the screen and leave a like because it helps the channel. And I would see you in the next video. Goodbye.